TFT LCD. Thin film transistor liquid crystal display, usually called TFT LCD, was one of the first display technologies to make modern smartphones practical. Before it became common, many phones used passive matrix LCD panels that refreshed slowly and often left a faint trail behind moving objects. TFT technology gave every pixel its own tiny transistor, allowing the display to react much faster and produce a sharper, more stable image. The display itself does not create light. Instead, a bright backlight shines through several layers inside the screen. Liquid crystals act like tiny adjustable windows that control how much light passes through each pixel. Color filters then produce the familiar red, green, and blue subpixels that combine into millions of different colors. Early TFT LCD panels were a huge step forward compared to older displays. Text became easier to read, animations looked smoother, and games felt much more responsive. For many people, the jump from older passive displays to TFT screens was almost as noticeable as moving from black and white televisions to color ones. Even so, the technology had its weaknesses. Viewing angles were often narrow, meaning colors and brightness changed when the phone was tilted. Black areas also appeared more like dark gray because the backlight was always shining behind the screen, even when an image was supposed to be completely black. Power consumption stayed fairly constant regardless of what appeared on the display. Whether the screen showed a white web page or a black wallpaper, the backlight continued working at nearly the same brightness. That made battery life predictable, but it also meant TFT LCD could never match the efficiency of later OLED displays when showing darker content. Manufacturers continuously improved TFT LCD technology over the years by increasing resolution, boosting brightness, and making colors more accurate. Many budget smartphones still use versions of TFT LCD today because the panels remain inexpensive to produce and are durable enough for everyday use. Although newer display technologies have largely replaced it in premium devices, TFT LCD played a critical role in smartphone history. It created the foundation that allowed larger touchscreens, richer graphics, and mobile internet to become part of daily life. IPS LCD. In-plane switching LCD, better known as IPS LCD, was developed to solve many of the problems found in traditional TFT displays. Engineers wanted a screen that looked more consistent from different angles while also producing richer and more accurate colors. The result became one of the most successful display technologies ever used in smartphones. The biggest improvement came from the way the liquid crystals moved. Instead of twisting in a way that caused light to scatter unevenly, the crystals rotated more smoothly within the same plane. This allowed colors and brightness to remain much more stable even when the phone was viewed from the side. For everyday users, the difference was immediately noticeable. Friends could gather around one phone to watch a video without the picture becoming washed out. Photos appeared closer to real life, making IPS LCD especially popular among people who enjoyed photography or content creation. Color accuracy became one of the strongest selling points of IPS panels. Designers, artists, and photographers often preferred devices with IPS displays because the colors stayed more faithful to the original image. While calibration varied between manufacturers, IPS earned a reputation for reliable color reproduction. Brightness also improved significantly. Since LCD technology relies on a backlight, manufacturers could use powerful LEDs to make IPS displays easy to read outdoors. Even under bright sunlight, many IPS panels remained clear enough for comfortable use. Like every LCD technology, IPS still depended on a permanent backlight. This meant true black was impossible because a small amount of light always leaked through the liquid crystal layer. In dark rooms, this often appeared as a faint gray glow instead of complete darkness. IPS LCD generally consumed more power than OLED when displaying dark interfaces, but it could actually become more efficient during bright tasks where OLED had to illuminate millions of individual pixels at maximum brightness. Because of this balance, IPS remained competitive for many years. Durability also helped IPS LCD stay relevant. The panels were resistant to burn-in, a problem that can affect OLED displays after long periods of showing static images. For users who kept navigation bars or interface elements on screen for many hours every day, this was an important advantage. Even after OLED became the premium standard, IPS LCD continued to appear in tablets, laptops, monitors, and many mid-range smartphones. Its combination of reliable colors, wide viewing angles, long lifespan, and relatively low manufacturing cost kept it popular across many different devices. LTPS LCD. Low-temperature polycrystalline silicon LCD, commonly known as LTPS LCD, was created to improve the performance of traditional LCD screens without completely changing how they worked. Instead of focusing on the liquid crystal layer itself, engineers redesigned the thin film transistor layer that controls every pixel. This allowed the display to become sharper, faster, and more energy efficient while still using the familiar LCD structure. The key difference lies in the material used for the transistors. Standard TFT displays normally use amorphous silicon, which is relatively inexpensive but limits how quickly electrical signals can move. LTPS replaces this with polycrystalline silicon, a material that allows electrons to travel much faster. As a result, the display can drive more pixels while using smaller transistors. Because the transistors take up less space, more of each pixel is available to let light pass through. This means manufacturers can increase the screen resolution without making the display noticeably dimmer. It became possible to fit full HD and later Quad HD resolutions into smartphone displays while keeping text crisp and images highly detailed. LTPS also helped improve battery life. Since the transistors are more efficient, they require less electrical power to control the pixels. Although the backlight still consumes a significant amount of energy, reducing the power used by the display circuitry helped extend battery life, especially as smartphone screens continued to grow larger. Another important advantage is response speed. Faster transistors allow the display to refresh more quickly and react better to changing images. Scrolling through long web pages feels smoother, animations appear cleaner, and fast-moving video shows less motion blur than on older LCD technologies. For manufacturers, LTPS became an attractive option because it offered many premium features without requiring a complete switch to OLED. During the mid-2010s, numerous flagship smartphones used LTPS LCD panels before OLED production became affordable enough for wider adoption. Apple relied heavily on LTPS LCD technology in several generations of iPhones before moving many models to OLED. Other companies also used LTPS in premium Android devices, tablets, and portable gaming systems where high resolution and accurate touch response were especially important. Despite its improvements, LTPS still shares the fundamental limitations of every LCD. It depends on a backlight, cannot produce perfect black levels, and generally has lower contrast than OLED. Even so, many experts still consider a high-quality LTPS LCD to be one of the best versions of traditional LCD technology ever developed. Today, LTPS continues to appear in devices where manufacturers want excellent sharpness, dependable color accuracy, and lower production costs than OLED can sometimes offer. It represents the final stage of LCD evolution before self-emitting display technologies began taking over the premium smartphone market. IGZO LCD. Indium gallium zinc oxide LCD, better known by its shorter name IGZO LCD, introduced a different kind of improvement. Instead of changing the liquid crystal layer or the backlight, engineers developed a completely new semiconductor material for the transistors that control each pixel. This material offered much higher electron mobility than conventional amorphous silicon while also reducing power consumption. The name may sound highly technical, but its purpose is simple. By allowing electrical signals to move more efficiently, IGZO transistors can be made even smaller than many previous designs. Smaller transistors leave more room for light to pass through the display, making the screen brighter or allowing manufacturers to reduce the strength of the backlight while maintaining the same brightness. One of the most important advantages of IGZO is its ability to hold an image without constantly refreshing every pixel. When you're reading an article, looking at a photograph, or viewing a mostly static screen, the display does not need to update as frequently. This reduces power usage and helps extend battery life. This characteristic became especially useful as smartphone resolutions continued to increase. Driving millions of pixels requires enormous amounts of data every second. IGZO made handling these higher resolutions much easier without dramatically increasing energy consumption. Sharp Corporation played a major role in developing and commercializing IGZO technology. The company invested heavily in manufacturing techniques that allowed these advanced semiconductor layers to be produced on a large scale. Over time, several other manufacturers also adopted IGZO for selected devices. Beyond smartphones, IGZO found a home in tablets, professional monitors, laptops, and portable electronics where image quality and battery life were both priorities. Devices designed for digital drawing or reading particularly benefited because static images could remain on screen while consuming less energy. Another benefit is improved touch responsiveness. Since the transistors operate more efficiently, the display can react quickly to both visual updates and touch input. Writing with a stylus feels more natural, and fast gestures register with very little delay. Despite these strengths, IGZO never became the dominant smartphone display technology. Manufacturing costs were relatively high, and around the same time OLED displays began improving rapidly. Many companies decided to invest more heavily in OLED production, limiting how widely IGZO spread through the smartphone market. Even today, however, IGZO remains an impressive example of how improvements inside a display can significantly change its overall performance without altering the way the screen looks from the outside. It demonstrates that sometimes the biggest innovations happen beneath the surface, hidden inside layers that users never actually see. OLED. Organic light-emitting diode, better known as OLED, changed the direction of smartphone display technology more than almost any other innovation. Instead of relying on a separate backlight, every individual pixel produces its own light. This single difference transformed the way screens displayed color, contrast, and power efficiency. The word organic refers to the carbon-based compounds used inside the light-emitting layer. When electricity passes through these materials, they produce light directly. Since every pixel is its own tiny light source, an OLED display can turn individual pixels completely on or completely off without affecting the surrounding image. This ability creates one of OLED's most famous strengths, true black. When a part of the picture is supposed to be black, those pixels simply switch off entirely. No light escapes through the screen because no light is being produced in the first place. The result is a level of contrast that traditional LCD displays cannot achieve. Watching movies is one of the areas where OLED makes the biggest difference. Dark scenes appear much deeper and more realistic because the black bars above and below widescreen videos blend almost perfectly into the edge of the display. Small highlights, such as stars in a night sky or city lights after sunset, stand out much more clearly against the surrounding darkness. Another important advantage is power efficiency during darker content. Since black pixels remain off, they consume virtually no electricity. Users who enable dark mode on their phones often see longer battery life because large portions of the display require very little power. However, bright white screens can consume more energy than many people expect because nearly every pixel must operate at high brightness. OLED also allows displays to become much thinner. Without a bulky backlight, manufacturers can reduce the overall thickness of the screen assembly. This helped smartphone companies create slimmer devices while also leaving more internal space for batteries, cameras, or other components. Flexibility is another major benefit. Organic display layers can be built on flexible materials rather than rigid glass. This opened the door to curved smartphone screens, edge displays, foldable phones, and even rollable display prototypes. None of these designs would have been practical with conventional LCD technology. Color reproduction is another reason OLED became so popular. Since each pixel emits its own light, colors often appear more vibrant and saturated. Reds look richer, blues become more vivid, and the overall image can appear more striking. Some manufacturers intentionally tune their displays for bold colors, while others calibrate them to produce a more natural appearance. High refresh rates also pair well with OLED technology. Modern OLED panels commonly support 90 Hz, 120 Hz, or even higher refresh rates, making scrolling smoother and improving gaming responsiveness. Combined with their excellent response times, OLED displays produce very little motion blur compared with many older LCD panels. Despite its strengths, OLED is not perfect. Organic materials slowly wear out as they age. Blue pixels typically degrade faster than red or green ones, although modern manufacturing techniques have greatly improved their lifespan. After many years of heavy use, the display may gradually lose brightness or experience slight color shifts. Another well-known issue is burn-in. If the same image remains on the screen for extremely long periods, faint outlines of interface elements can become permanently visible. Navigation buttons, notification icons, or status bars were once common causes. Today's smartphones reduce this risk through software techniques that subtly move interface elements by tiny amounts that users rarely notice. Manufacturing OLED displays is also more complicated than producing many LCD panels. Organic materials must be deposited with extremely high precision, and defects are more difficult to correct during production. This has traditionally made OLED more expensive, although prices have steadily decreased as production has expanded around the world. Over the past decade, OLED has become the preferred display technology for most flagship smartphones. It combines exceptional contrast, rich colors, fast response times, and flexible design possibilities in a way that fundamentally changed user expectations. What once felt like a premium feature has gradually become the new standard for high-end mobile displays. AMOLED. Active Matrix Organic Light-Emitting Diode, or AMOLED, builds directly on OLED technology while adding a more advanced method of controlling the pixels. Although many people use the terms OLED and AMOLED as if they mean exactly the same thing, there is an important technical difference. OLED describes the light-producing technology itself, while AMOLED describes the driving system that controls those light-emitting pixels. The phrase active matrix refers to a network of thin-film transistors placed behind the display. Every pixel has its own dedicated transistor and capacitor that control exactly when it turns on, how bright it becomes, and how long it stays illuminated. This gives the display much greater precision than older passive matrix OLED panels. Because each pixel is controlled independently, AMOLED screens respond extremely quickly to changes in the image. Fast-moving scenes remain sharp, touch input feels immediate, and scrolling through apps appears remarkably smooth. The response time is measured in tiny fractions of a millisecond, far faster than most LCD technologies. AMOLED also supports extremely high resolutions without sacrificing image quality. As smartphone displays grew from HD to Full HD, Quad HD, and beyond, the active matrix design allowed millions of pixels to be updated efficiently while maintaining smooth performance. Another advantage is improved power management. Since every pixel receives only the amount of electricity it actually needs, darker portions of the image consume very little energy. Combined with the ability to switch individual pixels completely off, AMOLED became one of the most battery-friendly display technologies for users who frequently use dark themes. Manufacturers also gained more freedom in industrial design. The display layers could be made thinner, lighter, and more flexible than traditional LCD panels. This allowed companies to reduce bezels, curve displays around the edges of phones, and eventually develop foldable smartphones with surprisingly durable flexible screens. Brightness improved steadily over the years as well. Early AMOLED displays sometimes struggled outdoors under direct sunlight, but modern generations can reach brightness levels high enough to remain readable even in bright daylight while automatically adjusting to protect battery life. One characteristic often associated with AMOLED displays is their vivid appearance. Colors can look highly saturated, making photos, games, and videos appear striking. Some users enjoy this dramatic look, while others prefer display modes that reduce saturation for a more natural image. Most smartphone manufacturers now provide multiple color profiles so users can choose the style they like best. Because AMOLED shares its core technology with OLED, it also shares many of the same long-term challenges. Organic materials still age over time, and burn-in remains possible after extremely prolonged use. However, improvements in materials, software, and display management have made these issues much less common than they once were. Today, AMOLED has become one of the defining technologies of premium smartphones. Its combination of excellent contrast, vibrant colors, rapid response, efficient power usage, and flexible design has made it one of the most influential display technologies in the modern mobile industry. Super AMOLED. Super AMOLED is Samsung's enhanced version of AMOLED technology, introduced to make smartphone displays thinner, brighter, and more responsive. While AMOLED already offered impressive picture quality, Samsung redesigned the structure of the display by integrating the touch-sensitive layer directly into the screen itself. This eliminated the need for a separate touch panel placed above the display. At first glance, this change may seem small, but it produced several noticeable improvements. With one less layer between the user's eyes and the pixels, less light is reflected back from the screen. As a result, images appear clearer, especially outdoors where reflections from sunlight can make a display difficult to read. The thinner construction also helped reduce the overall thickness of smartphones. Every fraction of a millimeter matters when engineers are trying to fit larger batteries, better cameras, and more advanced cooling systems into increasingly slim devices. Removing an entire layer gave designers more flexibility without sacrificing display quality. Touch responsiveness improved as well. Since the touch sensors became part of the display itself, finger movements could be detected slightly faster and with greater accuracy. The difference is subtle, but when scrolling through web pages or playing fast-paced games, interactions feel more immediate. Like standard AMOLED, Super AMOLED allows every pixel to emit its own light. This means black areas remain completely black because the corresponding pixels simply switch off. The result is outstanding contrast, making text easier to read and giving photographs a greater sense of depth. Samsung also focused heavily on improving outdoor visibility. Early OLED displays sometimes struggled under bright sunlight because reflections reduced perceived brightness. By reducing internal reflections and increasing peak brightness, Super AMOLED made it much easier to use a phone outside on sunny days. Color reproduction became one of the defining characteristics of Super AMOLED displays. Samsung initially tuned many of its screens to produce highly saturated colors that made photos, videos, and games appear especially vibrant. Some users loved this bold appearance, while others preferred a more realistic look. In response, later devices introduced multiple display modes that allowed users to switch between vivid and natural color profiles. Another advantage is energy efficiency. Because individual pixels can turn off completely, displaying black backgrounds requires almost no power. Combined with software features such as dark mode and always-on displays, Super AMOLED helps many smartphones achieve longer battery life during everyday use. As refresh rates increased across the smartphone industry, Super AMOLED continued evolving. Modern versions commonly support refresh rates of 120 Hz or higher, making scrolling exceptionally smooth while maintaining the deep contrast and fast response times that OLED technology is known for. Although the name Super AMOLED belongs specifically to Samsung, the improvements it introduced influenced display development across the entire smartphone industry. Many competing manufacturers adopted similar integrated touch designs, even if they used different marketing names for their own display technologies. Today, Super AMOLED remains closely associated with Samsung's premium smartphones and tablets. It represents years of continuous refinement, combining rich colors, deep blacks, excellent brightness, responsive touch performance, and increasingly efficient power management into a single display technology.